And Dima Yankova, you work exactly in your research at this point, you work on mechanisms of knowledge transfer within collaborative networks, as I already said, at networks like Enhance. And how can that actually work? How can you bring those two together, those aspects together, social and technical innovation, and how can networks like Enhance help there in that regard? Dima.
Thank you, Mr. Viarda, for the introduction. Yeah, so my research focuses very much on the micromechanisms of both knowledge creation and knowledge transfer within localized collaborative innovation networks. And I'm going to try to provide some insight from my own research and sort of tie it back also to the arguments that the other panelists have made in the conversation so far. So I guess I'll just highlight two observations or two trends that I've seen in my own study of the literature. And one has to do with sort of who do we think are the main actors in a innovation network? And so we tend to typically imagine universities that of course play a very pivotal role because they're the drivers of research and innovation. And we think of private firms as well, like startups, SMEs, multinational corporations. But increasingly, we're seeing a recognition of the so-called non-commercial entities. So if we think of civil organizations, users associations, foundations, nonprofits, these associations are also very much part of the innovation process, but somehow they're missing from the map when we think of, or when we imagine a map of a local innovation network. And I think part of it has to do with just the empirical difficulties of tracing the contribution of non-commercial organizations, but there also has been some sort of theoretical gap in the literature as well. And the other point I wanted to highlight, which I think goes back to your question, is the need to embed local innovation networks into global ones. So no matter how successful or how innovative a local ecosystem may be at the current moment, it will ultimately run the risk of getting stuck or sort of experiencing stagnation and eventually decline if it fails to establish a sufficient number of linkages to external sources of novel knowledge and information. So here the connection to other networks and to sort of networks on a national or even international level become very important. And we've seen in the literature that universities tend to be those focal actors that have both the capacity, they have the incentive, and they also have the resources to establish these extra-regional linkages. And in a way, they help to feed their local innovation ecosystem precisely with novel ideas, with novel knowledge that is non-redundant, and sometimes it's not available locally. And that is also the birthplace of breakthrough innovation. So that is one role in which universities can play very well. And they tend to, that's why we tend to think of them as focal actors in localized innovation networks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Dima. How did you come up with this research topic as a PhD student? How did you get this idea to do research on this specific, very specific question?
Right, so I was interested in networks in general. I'm interested in how actors choose to collaborate with each other and how knowledge transfers. But also the ultimate goal of this research is to contribute to improving the European Union's smart specialization policies, which is sort of the cornerstone innovation policy right now across European regions, because it's the research that I'm doing is part of another alliance between European universities called POLIS, or Policies for Smart Specialization.